June is always stifling, especially after 3 in the afternoon. Sunlight sticks to your skin like syrup, making every inch of you feel gross. That day, I'd taken the day off because our air conditioner was broken. The repair guy was supposed to come around 4, but the heat was unbearable. I cracked open a few windows, hoping for a breeze, but all I got was a house full of bugs and hot air that felt even worse. I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, trying not to move so I wouldn't sweat even more. My phone was about to die, but I was too lazy to grab the charger. Even scrolling mindlessly felt like too much effort. My brain was empty, just waiting for the AC to be fixed. That's when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it was the repairman, but when I opened the door, there was a woman I'd never seen before. She looked about 40, wearing a wrinkled grey shirt and worn-out jeans, her hair a messy knot on the back of her head. She held a small cardboard box in her hands. She didn't say a word, just handed me the box. I frowned and asked if she had the wrong address, but she shook her head and said in a dry, raspy voice, "This is for you." Then she turned around and walked away. I didn't even get to say thank you. She was already halfway down the stairs. I looked at the box. No name, no label, just a black circle drawn with a single eye in the middle. It was weird, but curiosity won. I brought it inside. The box was taped up tight. It took me a few minutes to get it open. Inside was a handmade cloth doll. You could tell by the crook stitching that it wasn't professionally made. It had a big head, stubby limbs, and was wrapped entirely in deep red fabric, like it had been dyed. The creepiest part was its face. It wasn't drawn on. It was sewn together, every feature done by hand, with shiny black beads for eyes that actually seemed to glimmer in the light. I caught myself staring into those beady eyes. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but it made my skin crawl. Maybe it was just the suffocating heat messing with my head. I set the doll down on the dining table, debating whether I should just throw it out. But that felt wrong. Somehow someone had gone out of their way to give it to me, even if it was a prank or a mistake. I figured I'd deal with it later. All I wanted was cold air. The repair guy finally showed up around 6:30. I stayed with him while he worked, and when he was done, the house was bearable again. I made some mac and cheese for dinner, ate in front of the TV. The doll was still there on the table, its shadow catching my eye every time I looked up. Eventually, I got sick of it and put it in my bedroom closet, all the way on the top shelf. I thought that would be the end of it. Around 11, I turned off the lights and went to bed. The hum of the AC was like a lullaby. I fell asleep almost immediately. But at around 2 in the morning, I woke up. The room was pitch black except for a sliver of streetlight sneaking through the curtains. I didn't know what had woken me at first. Then I heard it. A faint sound, like fabric brushing against a hanger. Just once, quick. I stared at the closet for a while, but didn't see anything. Probably just a mouse, I told myself. I rolled over and forced myself back to sleep. The next morning, I got up to get ready for work. When I opened the closet to grab a shirt, the doll was gone. I was certain I'd left it on the top shelf the night before, but now it was nowhere in sight. I crouched down and found it at the very bottom, next to an old shoebox lying face down on the floor like it had been tossed there. A chill crawled up my back, but I laughed it off. Probably fell when I moved the hangers. I put it back where it was and rushed out the door. All day at work, I felt off. My mind kept drifting. My body felt wrong. At lunch, I ordered my favorite burger, but felt nauseous halfway through. I thought maybe it was heat exhaustion, so I went home and lay down for a bit. But by nightfall, things were worse. The lights flickered a few times, the AC made strange noises, and then the whole house went dark. I fumbled for a flashlight to check the fuse box, but the second I found it, I heard a sound from the bedroom. Not the wind, not the creak of old wood, more like something being dragged across the floor. A soft, slow dragging. I turned and aimed the flashlight toward the closet. The door was half open, pitch black inside, but the sound was coming from there, over and over. My heart was hammering, my throat dry as sand. I stood frozen, gripping the flashlight. After what felt like forever, the sound stopped. I forced myself to walk over and swing the door open. Nothing. The doll was gone too. I backed away and closed the door. As I turned around, something brushed my ankle, just a light touch. I looked down. The doll was lying at my feet, face up, those bead eyes staring straight at me. I didn't say a word. I bent down and picked it up. The second my fingers touched it, I felt it. It was warm, like someone had been holding it. The fabric wasn't dry anymore. It was damp and sticky. I threw it onto the couch and bolted to the bathroom to scrub my hands, my pulse pounding so hard my ears rang. I didn't sleep at all that night. At dawn, I stuffed the doll into a garbage bag and dumped it in the building's trash bins out back. I told myself it was all in my head, just paranoia. I spent the whole day cleaning the apartment, checking every corner. But that night at 10, when I went to the kitchen for a glass of water, the doll was back on the dining table. Same spot, like it had never been thrown away. I didn't try to get rid of it again. That night, I locked it in a drawer, sealed it shut with tape, and shoved furniture in front of it. I didn't want to see it, didn't want to touch it. I didn't understand why this was happening, but I started noticing other things. In the mornings, stuff in my room would be moved. Light switches flipped, the faucet dripping, water stains on the bathroom mirror shaped like handprints. My sleep got worse. I'd jolt awake in the middle of the night. Sure, I'd heard faint laughter. I once had a friend stay over, but he woke up around 3 a.m. saying he heard me talking in my sleep, but the voice didn't sound like mine. I didn't explain. I just blamed stress. 3 days ago, I found the drawer wide open, the tape torn. The doll was sitting on my pillow, its shiny eyes watching me. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I drove for an hour into the middle of nowhere and threw it into a river. That night, I slept 4 hours for the first time in weeks. But the next morning, when I walked into the kitchen, there it was, the same cardboard box, sitting on the table. Inside was the doll, dripping wet, smelling faintly of dirt. I don't know what to do anymore. I tried burning it, but the fire won't catch like it's soaked. I even called 911 once, but how am I supposed to explain that my doll keeps coming back? So now, I just leave it alone. I keep it in the closet, check every morning to see if it's still there, and make sure the door is shut before I go to sleep each night. Halloween fell on a Friday that year. The weather was cool, and the air smelled like roasted pumpkin mixed with fallen leaves. I clocked out right at 3:45 p.m., spent a bit of extra time avoiding the traffic near the school zone, and by the time I got home, it was already getting dark. I didn't bother with dinner, just fried up a few frozen chicken tenders with ketchup, and made myself a cup of instant cocoa. 2 orange plastic pumpkin lanterns sat by my front door, the same ones I'd been using since last year. One switch was loose, so the light kept flickering. I live in an average suburban neighborhood where every house puts up Halloween decorations. Yards were full of paper spiders and fake skeletons, ghosts made from black fabric hanging from trees, and plastic tombstones stuck in the grass. The kids usually start trick-or-treating around 5:30 every year. I stock up on a few big bags of chocolates and sour candies. This year was no different. I had 3 giant bags in a basket by the door, and I'd snack on them while watching the kids line up. At first, it was just the neighbors' kids, little vampires, witches, even a mini Spider-Man. They were polite, yelling trick or treat, before taking their candy, then running off to the next house. The first couple of hours were fine. The street was busy, parents strolling around with travel mugs, chatting in the crisp air. After 7:30, the kids thinned out and the street quieted down. I peeked through the blinds and saw that Jack across the street had already taken down his inflatable witch. Only a few porch lights were still on. I tossed the empty candy bags and dumped the rest into a bowl. There was about half left, plenty for whoever was still out. At 7:52, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to see 3 kids standing there. Their costumes didn't look store-bought. One had a hat made from rolled-up newspaper. Another was wrapped head to toe on a black garbage bag, and the last one just had a sheet thrown over them with 2 holes cut out for eyes. I didn't recognize them. I know most of the kids around here, at least by sight, but not these 3, no parents in sight. They didn't say a word, just quietly lifted their hands like they were waiting for candy. I said, "Trick or treat," trying to lighten the mood. Nothing. They just stood there, perfectly still. I reached in, grabbed a handful of candy, and dropped it into their buckets. They didn't move until I shut the door. Back on the couch, I tried to focus on the TV, but my mind kept drifting. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't place those kids' faces. It wasn't just that they were unfamiliar. It was the silence, too quiet. At 8:19, another knock. I opened the door, same 3 kids. Same costumes, same buckets. I blinked at them. "You guys already came by," I said, half laughing. They didn't react. I sighed and gave them more candy. This time I noticed their buckets were practically empty. Only the pieces I'd given them before. Nothing from any other house. Something about that made my stomach twist, but I didn't ask. I just shut the door again. Back in the kitchen, rinsing my mug, I heard a rustle outside. The sound of plastic bags flapping in the wind. I peeked through the window. Those 3 kids were still there, standing at my door, staring. I opened the door again. They didn't move, didn't reach out. I frowned. "I gave you candy already. It's late. Go home now, okay?" Silence. The 2 holes in that sheet stared straight at me, cold and hollow. A chill crawled up my back. I slammed the door and locked it this time. Instead of going back to the couch, I grabbed my phone and stepped into the kitchen. I thought about calling a neighbor. Maybe someone knew who these kids were. Before I could dial, another knock. I stared at the door. I wasn't opening it again. Another knock, softer this time, almost polite. I raised my voice. "I don't have any more candy." Silence. Then a faint tap, like a single knuckle on wood. I stepped back, phone in hand, screen still glowing, but I couldn't bring myself to make the call. There was a pressure in my chest, not quite fear, more like something heavy pushing against my ribs. 5 minutes passed. Nothing. I crept to the window and pulled the blinds aside. Empty porch. They were gone. I sat back on the couch, trying to calm down. A few minutes later, the lights flickered twice. I got up, walked to the entryway. The candy bowl had fallen to the floor. The rest of the candy was gone. I knelt to pick up the bowl. My heart thudded against my ribs. Just as I was about to stand, I heard a dull thud behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Something was wrong. Really wrong. I called Diane next door. She's the type who knows everyone's business. No answer. I tried Jack. No answer. I stood in the living room, feeling the silence press down on me. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed louder than my own breathing. I went to the kitchen, flicked the light switch. Nothing. The whole house sank into a thick, half-darkness. Only the flickering Halloween pumpkin by the door was still glowing. Its faint light cast 3 thin shadows against the window. I froze. The shadows didn't move. Just pressed up against the glass. I stepped back. My phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor. Then, the door creaked open by itself. No one came in. Cold air gusted through, making the plastic pumpkins sway. The last bit of light flickered out. Total darkness. I heard something in the kitchen. Footsteps, small and careful, like kids padding across a wooden floor. Each step made my skin crawl. I couldn't see them come inside, but I heard them, moving across the kitchen, into the living room, closer and closer, until they stopped just a few steps in front of me. I couldn't see a thing, but I knew they were there. Then, I felt a tiny tug at the hem of my shirt. Not rough, not forceful. Just a gentle pull, like a child asking you to bend down. I shut my eyes tight, reached into my pocket, and pulled out the last 2 pieces of candy I had. I set them on the floor in front of me. No sound, but I felt something lean down and take them. The footsteps retreated, soft and steady, until they were gone. I don't know how long I stood there before I dared to open my eyes again. The house was still pitch black, but the shadows by the window were gone. I turned the lights back on. Everything looked normal. The next day, I asked my neighbors if anyone had seen 3 kids in weird homemade costumes. Everyone said no. In fact, they said hardly any kids were out after 8. Jack told me he'd packed up his decorations by 7:30 and didn't see a single kid pass by after that.